These things are real. They're here. This is happening now.
A light appeared, and like a blue bar of light hovering over the road. On one side, witnesses could see it. On the other side, they couldn't see anything.
Our night that we went out there, they were blasting the phenomenon with EM frequencies from Bowsy through the tunnels into the forest. Because those blue lights that we saw, plasmas being targeted by lasers. They were generating a phenomenon which was probably what they were hitting was the actual phenomenon, the exposure, what they created from blasting this energy.
They got immediately merged into UFOs, and I'm not sure what UFOs are, but these aren't spacecraft. These aren't extraterrestrial.
High-power radars and ionospheric heaters are capable of making atmospheric plasmas. Now, these are glowing balls of light, like ball lightning. They can move from speeds that are stationary to many thousands of miles an hour. They will follow Earth energy gradients. If they're artificial, if it's by radar sweep, then they may be swept across the sky in regular or intelligent patterns.
We have now released Plan Quick Strike. Repeat, we have now released Plan Quick Strike.
On this Phenomenon Radio broadcast, we will deep dive into the world of UAP. Past to the present, and some considerations, historical accounts, possibilities, and some personal perspectives on a substantial number of UAP issues. Some involve close encounters with UAP and the effects on human beings. Add up threat assessment, weaponizing UAPs, and the race to be the first to do it, and we have a lot to unpack in this edition of Phenomenon Radio, the weaponization of UAP. I invite you to join us tonight to dig deeper, to go farther, leave no stone unturned to discover the indisputable truth to the tough questions regarding UAP. Across the bonds of history, humanity has looked to the sky, trying to understand the mysteries of the universe. What is a UAP? The same intrigue formulated from the term UFO? Are they the same, or are they a part of something bigger which may incorporate both scenarios? Why ask? Why not? What we need to accept is that there are objects flying within our airspace. Without transponders to identify them, they may be classified as foreign or UFOs by those we expect to keep our skies safe. Considering the many encounters throughout history that document experiences with what we might term UAP, or indeed alien visitations, it beggars belief that the subject has only begun to take on any significance over the last 50 or so years, and has now piqued public interest across the world to such an extent that it has taken on a life of its own. In the past, we could only rely on information given or passed down through our ancestors or elders by word of mouth than the written word. Today, detection and identification rely on high-cutting technology, which is in the hands of those from whom we might expect some honest answers. National security would prevent anything that they know is ours, or maybe technology from a foreign power, to be made public. So how do we separate those from the truly unknowns? Humanity's interest in the gods. This piece from the book Origin of the Gods is a newly updated version by Andrew Collins and Gregory L. Little, and it is very interesting. Time, temporal intrusions of intelligent manifesting energy, For decades, I have struggled to find a simple descriptive term that adequately encompassed the crucial attributes of this force. The terms plasmas, earthlight, ghost lights, light forms, unexplained aerial phenomena, ball lightning, and even UFOs all fail to cover what this is. All of these terms fall short, and all of them place limits on our understanding. Even when we mention plasmas as a form of manifestation, the ancients saw as gods a set of preconceived beliefs stimulated by the terms plasmas and gods. However, this paranormal energy phenomenon does have a set of consistent characteristics. It is temporal, meaning that its appearance is always transient. It is a localized intrusion, meaning that it suddenly manifests within a confined physical space, sometimes not even discernible to others within a rather close proximity. It has intelligence, and it is able to interact and respond to its participants. It is a manifestation of energy that is often plasma-based, if not always plasma-based. This energy moves between different electromagnetic spectrum wavelengths. It is a fluid-like manifestation that forms on the edges of what we think of as physical reality versus pure energy. For the lack of a better term, I now simply refer to it as time, temporal intrusions of intelligent manifesting energy. It has been on Earth since the beginning. It is the force that generated the angelic appearances seen by the ancient prophets and the beings of light that visited Swedenborg, Joan of Arc, and Casey, and the manifestations of the Zetun. It was the force behind many contactee reports and abduction stories and the countless other tales thought by skeptics to be so bizarre that the stories simply could not be true. But it is in a genuine force that the ancients came to see as an important source of knowledge, especially if one could get beyond the initial trickster-like aspects that usually occurred. The ancients willingly sought out connecting with these time forces, and did so when human-created EMF pollution was not present. Egypt, 1374 BC. The bonds of history has humanity having interaction with UAP, from the pharaoh seeing a shining disk in the sky in 1347 BC that changed the way they looked at religion to modern-day encounters. Pharaoh Akhenaten observed a shining disk in the sky. This altered Egyptian history as it led to drastic changes in the religious beliefs as well as those of society. They began to worship the sun. The king wrote about being visited by beings that came from the sky, and the ancient Egyptians worshipped him as a god, believing he was a direct descendant of the Aten, the disk of the sun. This was known as Antonism. It has been suggested that Akhenaten was actually the founder of the Judeo-Christian religion. Aerial Battle of Nuremberg in 1561 AD. One of the earliest documented sightings of aerial phenomena took place on April 4th, 1561 at dawn over Nuremberg, Germany. What was described as a war in the heavens, with a wide variety of craft, ranging from spheres to spear-like cylinders to crosses and plates. In the morning of April 14th, 1561, at daybreak, between 4 and 5 a.m., a dreadful apparition occurred on the sun, and then this was seen in Nuremberg in the city, before the gates, and in the country by many men and women. At first, they appeared in the middle of the sun, two blood-red semicircle arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter, and in the sun, above and below, and on both sides the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black ferrous color. Likewise, there stood on both sides, as a torus about the sun, such blood-red ones and other balls in large numbers, about 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes there were visible a few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips, becoming thicker to the rear, and in the front malleable like rods of reed glass, which were intermingled, among them 2 big rods, one on the right and the other on the left. And within the small and big rods there were 3, also 4 and more globes. These all started to fight among themselves, so that the globes, which were first in the sun, flew out to the one standing on both sides. Thereafter, the globes standing outside the sun in the small and large rods flew into the sun. Besides, the globes that flew back and forth among themselves and fought vehemently with each other over the sun for an hour. And when the conflict in and again out of the sun was most intense, they became fatigued to such an extent that they all, as said above, fell from the sun upon the earth as if they all burned. And they then wasted away on the earth with immense smoke. After all this, there was something like a black spear, very long and thick-sided. The shaft pointed to the east. The point pointed west. Whatever such signs mean, God alone knows. Although we have seen, shortly one after another, many kinds of signs in heaven, which are sent to us by the Almighty God to bring us to repentance, we still are, unfortunately, so ungrateful that we despise such high signs and miracles of God, or we seek of them with ridicule and discard them to the wind, in such order that God may send us a frightening punishment on account of our ungratefulness. After all, the God-fearing will by no means discard these signs, but will take it to heart as a warning of their merciful Father in heaven, will mend their lives, and faithfully beg God that he may avert his wrath, including the well-deserved punishment on us, so that we may temporarily here and perpetually there live as his children. For it may God grant us his help. Amen. By Hans Glaser, letter painter of Nuremberg. Northeastern Arizona. The origin of Kachinas is not entirely known, but according to Hopi oral traditions, these mostly benevolent spiritual beings came from the underworld with the Hopi people. They emerged from the ground near the villages where the Hopi continue to live today. The Kachinas taught the people how to make tools and hunt and heal sickness and live off the land by collecting plants and herbs and planting crops. A spirit in Western Puebloan religious beliefs, Kachinas are the central theme within several cultures, including the Hopi and the Tua village on the Hopi Reservation in Arizona, and the Zuni, Acoma, and the Laguna Pueblos in New Mexico. Also called Kachina, Kakina, or Kachina, these spirits or personifications of things in the natural world may represent anything from rain to crops to various animals, stars, and beloved ancestors, and even other Indian tribes. The word Kachina derives from the Hopi term Kachi, which means spirit father, life, or spirit. Kachina, or Hopi Kutsina in traditional religions of Pueblo Indians of North America any more than 500 divine and ancestral spirit beings who interact with humans. Each Pueblo culture has distinct forms and variations of Kuchinas. Kuchinas are believed to reside with the tribe for half of each year. They will allow themselves to be seen by a community of its men, properly perform a traditional ritual while wearing Kuchina masks and other regalia. The spirit being depicted on the mask is thought to be actually present with or within the performer, temporarily transforming him. The interaction with deities or other unknown forms is nothing new, but stories are passed down for a reason. One could suggest that a similar process may be occurring when engaging with odd air forms. The spirit world is something all too common to our ancestors. In this context, could we consider the emergence from the ground as something that might already be here, lying dormant? The Micronesian cosmos and its spirits. The Micronesian culture, for instance, ancestral spirits were often contacted in dreams and in the trance of spirit mediums, as were the high gods and other non-human spirits. They would give people information about the causes of diseases and deaths and other misfortunes and would sometimes prescribe new medicines. Their image of the cosmos allowed the Micronesians to explain how things work and why things happen, as in the case of the Polynesians and the Malaysians. The cosmos defined the spheres of activity between the spirits and humans. Within the cosmos are places for gods, ancestral spirits, and living humans. There are places where people go after death, places where the dead are put to various tests, and places where the living can interact with their deceased kin. Most Micronesian views of the cosmos are of a sky world as an inverted bowl with several layers populated by different categories of deities. The islands of Micronesia are seen as columns projecting up from the bottom of the sea, and the bottom of the sea has a trap door that opens, not into an underworld, but into an undersea world. This is where the people of some islands believe they go when they die. Many descriptions may be of energy depicting the form of a human to convey a message, which seems to be the case in many reports. Balls of light are a more common aspect to the UAP, as are messages of hope and sometimes warnings during communication with the phenomenon. Experiencers report being more spiritually aware and experience heightened clairvoyance after events. Those who experience NDE, or near-death experience, also quite often report similar effects. Maybe the phenomenon, or UAP, is trying to help us understand ourselves? Maybe it did once. Fatima, Portugal, 1917. Should UAP descriptions be used more inherently to describe these other phenomena, such as light beings? On October 17, 1917, an estimated 70,000 people gathered together at a small town north of Lisbon in Portugal called Fatima to watch a phenomenon which some described as the miracle of the sun. People saw numerous things, from a luminous ball of light to the Holy Family and much more. A torrential downpour drenched all 70,000 people. However, when this light phenomenon swooped down and startled the crowds, each and every one of the 70,000 people found their clothes had become instantly dry. there was a telepathic communication between some perceived to be the Virgin Mary and many of the witnesses, which is quite similar to modern UFO comparisons. There was also a strange buzzing sound, which entered some of the witnesses' ears, again similar to some UFO close encounters. One of the three main witnesses, all children, to whom these incredible visions occurred, Lucia, she stated that this apparition told her that World War I would end that day. It didn't. This is similar to statements from witnesses who have communication with aliens. Incidentally, this phenomenon was witnessed from over 20 miles away. And the light phenomenon was to some quite painful. The images of saints were seen along the edges of the luminosity in the region produced by the ionization of the air. The ionization of the air, seeming telepathic communication, buzzing sounds, and a luminous ball of light can all be correlated to the MOD 55-20-00. However, it's probably safe to say that in this case, it was not human-developed technology that produced the appearance. It is clear that substantial efforts were underway at the various research facilities around Rendlesham to research and develop the ability to manipulate the witness's perception with EM transmissions, most notably at the Macroney Labs facility. What of the term UAP as a part of the once classified title Project Condign? Unidentified aerial phenomena in the UK air defense region. This study, undertaken by the British government's Defense Intelligence Staff between 1997 and 2000. Very similar incidents to that of Fatima, also involving children, have been reported in Yugoslavia, Spain, Italy, and other parts of the world. Strange lights. According to Judith Bruschi, quote, "The Marfa Lights of West Texas have been called many names over the years, such as ghost lights, weird lights, mystery lights, or Chinati lights. The favorite place from which to view the lights is a widened shoulder on Highway 90 about 9 miles east of Marfa. The lights are most often reported as distant spots of brightness, distinguishable from ranch lights or automobile headlights on Highway 67, primarily by their apparent movements." Close quote. Robert and Judy Waggers define the, quote, classic Marfa lights, close quote, as being seen south-southwest of the Marfa Lights Viewing Center, or the MLVC. The left margin of the viewing area is aligned along the Big Bend Telephone Company Tower, and the right margin as the Chinati Peak when viewed from the MLVC. Referring to the Marfa Lights View Park, east of Marfa, James Bunnell states, quote, "You might just see mysterious orbs of light suddenly appear above the desert foliage. These balls of light may remain stationary as they pulse on and off with intensity, varying from dim to almost blinding brilliance. Then again, these ghostly lights may dart across the desert or perform splits and mergers. Light colors are usually yellow-orange, but other hues, including green and blue and red, also seen. Marfa mystery lights usually fly above the desert vegetation, but below background mesas." Closed quote. The Hestelin lights are of unknown origin. They appear both by day and by night, and seem to float through and above the valley. They are usually bright white lights, yellow or red, or can appear above or below the horizon. The duration of the phenomenon may be only a few seconds or well over an hour. Sometimes the lights move with enormous speed, and at other times they seem to sway slowly back and forth. On yet other occasions, they hover in mid-air. Usually, lights have been reported in the region since at least the 1930s. Especially high activity occurred in December of 1981 and mid-1984, during which the lights were observed 15 to 20 times per week, attracting many overnight tourists. And as of 2010, the number of observations have dwindled greatly, with only 10 to 20 sightings yearly. Since 1983, Project Hesselden, initiated by UFO Norge and UFO Sverige, or UFO Sweden, have attempted to investigate these lights. This project was active as field investigations during 1983 to 1985. A group of students, engineers, and journalists collaborated together on the Triangle Project in 1997 and 1998 and recorded the lights in a pyramid shape that bounced up and down. In 1998, the Hesselden Automatic Measurement Station was set up in the valley to register and record the appearance of lights. Later, a program named EMBLA, E-M-B-L-A, was initiated to bring together established scientists and students from leading institutions like the Østfold University College from Norway and the Italian National Research Council to research these lights. Min lights are a mysterious phenomenon that have spooked many people in the outback of Australia. But is there any scientific proof that min lights exist? Or is it simply an Aboriginal folk tale that has been passed down for generations? The lights have been described by witnesses as floating, fast-moving balls of color that glow in the night sky and stalk people, leaving some feeling confused and frightened. Sometimes the lights are blue and other times they are white or yellow. In Queensland, the Boolia Shire Council notifies visitors in the interest of tourism that they are in the land of the min lights and that they may spot them as they drive for the next 120 kilometers. In the Kimberley in Western Australia, the Aboriginal people believe the min lights are the spirits of elders. Sedona, Arizona. Now, Skinwalker Ranch, also known as the Sherman Ranch, is a property of approximately 512 acres located southeast of Ballard, Utah, that is reputed to be the site of paranormal and UFO-related activities. Its name is taken from the skinwalker of the Navajo legend concerning vengeful shamans. According to the book Hunt for the Skinwalker, odd objects have been spotted overhead since European explorers arrived. In 1776, Franciscan missionary Silvestre Valdez Escalante wrote about strange fireballs appearing over his campfire in El Rey. And before the Europeans, of course, indigenous peoples occupied the Uinta Basin. Today, the Skinwalker Ranch abuts the Unitah and Ouray Indian Reservation of the Ute tribe. Other strange sightings have occurred directly next door at Bottle Hollow, a 420-acre man-made reservoir on the Ute land abutting the ranch, which was filled with fresh water in 1970 by a federal government mandate. In 1998, a police officer saw a large light plunge into the reservoir, then re-emerge, flying off into the night sky. One night in 2002, 4 young men standing on the reservoir's shoreline saw a blue-white ball enter the artificial lake. According to Hunt for the Skinwalker, a glowing ball dove into the water just a few feet from the shoreline, then emerged seconds later in a new form, a shimmering, maneuverable, belt-shaped shaft of light. After performing a brief, writhing aerial dance, the belt of light zipped away at a high rate of speed, hugging the ground before disappearing below the top of Skinwalker Ridge. Next is the Bradshaw Ranch. This place has seen more paranormal activity in recent years than perhaps any other U.S. location. So much so, it appears to have attracted the attention of the U.S. federal government. A cluster of paranormal activity has been reported, from sightings of strange humanoid entities to pulsating lights of UFOs and the most massive amount of orb activity ever witnessed by an investigator. In the 1990s, Bradshaw's son, John Bradshaw, turned the land into a more functional, actual working ranch, and it also became popular as a recreation spot for camping, horseback riding, and other outdoor activities. At the time, this was a secluded place of natural beauty with a veneer of Hollywood laid over it. But things would begin to take a turn for the strange beginning in 1992 when a series of escalating strange phenomena began to creep across the ranch. It supposedly began with John Bradshaw's wife, Linda, who claimed to begin seeing mysterious orbs of light in the sky over the ranch, as well as sudden, bright flashes with no discernible cause and streaking mystery lights. This was perhaps to be expected because the region was already long known as a hotspot for UFO sightings, but things would escalate quickly and further branch out into the weird. As if UFOs and anomalous lights in the sky were not odd enough, Linda claimed that odd comets would move across the property, shooting beams of light, and that the place was crawling with barely glimpsed shadow people and other entities. Next is Whitehall Ministry of Defense, London, England. MOD classified Secret Project Condign released in year 2000 to British government's DIS, or Defense Intelligence Staff. Quote, "Across the bounds of history, humanity has had numerous interactions with what has been termed UAP or UFO. That unidentified aerial phenomena exists is indisputable, credited with the ability to hover, land, take off, accelerate to exceptional velocities, and vanish. They can reportedly alter their direction of flight suddenly and clearly exhibit aerodynamic characteristics well beyond those of any known aircraft or missile, either manned or unmanned." Close quote. The MOD admitted that the phenomenon presents itself as having exceptional capabilities. It does not matter where the hell it came from, whether it's a black budget or other civilization. If the phenomenon leaves that kind of evidence behind it and performs in that manner, it is of considerable defense interest. And if that is indeed the result of a black budget program, then one of the interests would be to conceal that fact. It is a given that the real phenomenon, whatever it may be, has the ability to project a given appearance of an object into the consciousness, and hence the apparent reality of the observer. The mechanism that allows for this has not been fully defined, although there are a number of theories that might account for the effect. Sir Robert Penrose and Stuart Hameroff are working on a theory that assumes that the waking consciousness of the individual is more than an emergent phenomenon resulting from an inherently complex arrangement of neurons. The microtubules identified by Hameroff may respond to significant quantum-level energy shifts, which are at the same time quite small shifts in measurable reality. Thus, either the near-field effects of certain theoretical propulsion systems and/or directed beams of certain forms of energy would be able to influence the mind, perception, reality of the observer. Exotic speculation. Some more exotic speculation goes along the lines that once we understand the nature of the universe better than we do now, we can affect our personal reality. Assuming that advanced intelligences have mastered that ability, it would seem likely that the local reality of the observer would be distorted to conclude any form of real object that was desired or intended for the observer to experience. And it's worth considering that if what was seen was truly the projection of an advanced intelligence into our minds, that the ability to distinguish between a truly alien intelligence and sophisticated Cold War EM weapons would be doubly hard. There are numerous books that are written about the narrow slices of aspects of the phenomena that deal with consciousness and that kind of thing. The phenomenon varies in presentation to the rational mind across time, and according to the cultural presets of the specific mind that encounters it. It appears out of seemingly elsewhere, defies classical physics, leaves a deep impression upon the observer, and then returns to from whence it came, leaving wonder, confusion, awe, bewilderment, and scant evidence in its wake. It acts as if it's in a dance with human consciousness, modifying its presentation according to time and place and the mind of the observer. This is an indication of a deep and profound intelligence at work, but it's also something that, if not taken into account, will send nuts and bolts UFO investigators down a hopeless path, trying to track down the source of what was specifically described in any given report, which may or may not actually be what the witness was dealing with. The Debrief Online. Recently in the Debrief Online, according to former Director of Science and Technology for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Dr. Eric Hasseltine, he suggests that, quote, one explanation is that the UAPs have essentially no mass, thus no aerodynamic surfaces that would create sonic booms, because they are not manufactured physical objects, but an exotic, yet known, form of matter called free air plasmas, close quote. Ultimately, Hasseltine says that more rigorous study is needed to determine what UAP isn't. Now, according to a 2019 publication from NARCAP, quote, 4 profiles of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, that are commonly associated with aviation safety-related incidents, these balls of light, disks, cylinders, and spheres, are reported to fly with attitudes, movements, and velocities that appear inconsistent with and often exceeded capabilities of airplanes and known aerial phenomena. Pilot witnesses include words like suddenly, instantaneously, and disappeared to describe UAP movements that are faster than their eye can visually track. These descriptions include sudden movements between points, angular changes of direction, instantaneous reversal of direction, extreme accelerations, sudden full stop hovers, and hovering, close quote. UAP balls of light. UAP balls of light represent a significant portion of the aviation safety-related UAP reports. UAP balls of light are coherent 360-degree radiators that can maintain output consistently or variably for hours and throughout the duration of most incidents. There are examples of concurrent failures of electrical systems during UAP incidents involving balls of light. They can range in size from 15 centimeters across to hundreds of meters across. There are many examples of UAP presenting as balls of light, both in the U.S. and international cases. Quote, it is unclear whether UAP balls of light are simply light forms, like a glowing plasma, or a light that is masking a solid object. Some UAP objects have been seen becoming enveloped in a bright glow and no longer discernible as an object, close quote. St. Elmo's fire, named after Saint Erasmus of Formia, also known as St. Elmo, the patron saint of sailors. The phenomenon, which can warn of an imminent lightning strike, also called witch fire or witch's fire, is a weather phenomenon in which luminous plasma is created by a corona discharge from a rod-like object such as a mast, a spire, a chimney, or animal horn in an atmospheric electrical field. It has also been observed on the leading edges of airplanes, as in the case of the British Airways Flight 009. The intensity of the effect, a blue or violet glow around the object, often accompanied by a hissing or buzzing sound, is proportional to the strength of the electric field and therefore noticeable primarily during thunderstorms or volcanic eruptions. Foo Fighters of World War II. The term Foo Fighter was used by Allied aircraft pilots during World War II to describe various UFOs or mysterious aerial phenomena seen in the skies over both the European and Pacific theaters of operation. Though Foo Fighter initially described a type of UFO reported and named by the U.S. 415th Night Fighter Squadron, the term was also commonly used to mean any UFO sighting from that period. Formally reported from November 1944 onwards, Foo Fighters were presumed by witnesses to be secret weapons employed by the enemy. The Robertson panel explored possible explanations. For instance, they were electrostatic phenomena similar to St. Elmo's fire, electromagnetic phenomena, or simply reflections of light from ice crystals. A group of scientists, engineers, and former high-ranking Luftwaffe officers were questioned about wartime balls of fire reports by staff from the United States Air Force and Europe's intelligence section in the early autumn of 1945. None of the 13 interviewed claimed any knowledge of a German secret weapons program that could have explained the sightings. The following is excerpted from a 60-page government report published by Edmund M. Dewan on March 1964 at the Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratories on the subject of ball lightning, a rarely observed phenomenon that occurs during severe thunderstorms. A hovering, gliding, or bouncing sphere of energy that can disappear quickly and harmlessly or terminate in a violent explosion. Because ball lightning has seldom been seen, the testimony of witnesses has often been dismissed as superstitious imaginings. Nevertheless, historical accounts of ball lightning chronicled characteristic behaviors with enough regularity to arouse the curiosity of scientists in the 20th century. Research published by a Russian scientist, Peter Kapitsa, in 1955 postulated that ball lightning was the result of microwaves feeding energy into a ball of plasma, the wavelength determining the size of the ball lightning approximately the size of a tennis ball. Unbeknownst to Kapitsa, the same theory was both advanced and disproved by scientist Manuel Carrillo in 1943 in a Mexican scientific journal. The microwave theory presumed that the ball's energy was supplied by an external source. Another possible explanation was that the source was internal, a contained, naturally occurring thermonuclear fusion. If the microwave theory were correct, this would rule out the possibility of ball lightning as a controlled nuclear fusion. If ball lightning were indeed nuclear fusion, understanding it could lead to the harnessing of a power source of unprecedented potency and cheapness, as well as finding applications in weapons technology. Both the Russian and American governments funded research into this field. The chief difficulty was that no scientist had ever been able to create ball lightning in a laboratory. Without an experiment, no empirical data could be collected, and to this day, the phenomenon is little understood. There is another Kugelblitz, it's German for ball lightning, A Kugelblitz is a black hole made from light rather than matter. If we developed a laser that shot gamma rays, the most energetic form of electromagnetic radiation that was magnitudes more powerful than any laser ever built, and focused it on a very precise point in space, we could make ourselves a Kugelblitz. A single pulse of this laser would need to put out the amount of energy equivalent to the sun in about 1/10 of a second, but we could theoretically construct such a device in the distant future. It may also be considered that if plasma is produced by a beam of particles, we have seen that this beam should be somewhat luminous. If it is produced by microwaves or infrared laser, it is invisible to the naked eye, except perhaps in the case of exceptional atmospheric conditions. Owing to its earlier appearance, since it was operationally available in 1942, it is the technology of the particle cannon which has our preference and which we intend to focus on in the remainder of this study. Thus, we will regularly refer to a particle cannon each time we call to mind the artificial generation of a ball of plasma in the atmosphere. In 2013, other reports were that open-air plasma device could revolutionize energy generation for the United States Navy's weaponry. Quote, "As for what this breakthrough actually means for the scientific community, we're not entirely sure," close quote. The University of Missouri claims, quote, "This technique could revolutionize energy generation and storage," close quote, but doesn't actually say how. Presumably, there is some basis to this claim, though there seemed to be very little in the way of peer-reviewed science in this area. Much more likely is the weaponization of this technology. Imagine a plasma rifle that can cut through just about anything, or a plasma shield that can instantly incinerate incoming ammunition and missiles. This theory is made all the more plausible by the research group's primary source of funding, the Office of Naval Research, the same office of the U.S. Navy that funds research into humbling and/or a terrifying railgun. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. In 2018, Stephen Aftergood from the Federation of American Scientists made a FOIA request to the DIA and received this reply. This responds to your Freedom of Information Act request dated August 15, 2018, that you submitted to the Defense Intelligence Agency for information concerning a copy of the list that was recently transmitted to Congress of all DIA products produced under the Advanced Aerospace Threat and Identification Program contract. The Honorable John McCain is also named alongside the Honorable Jack Reed in the released papers. The official remit for ATIP was to, quote, investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapon system applications with future technology projections over the next 40 years, and to create a center of expertise on advanced aerospace technologies, close quote. In truth, one of the less publicized investigations included this remit was to study anomalous events, which could refer to many sightings by pilots and military personnel of UAPs that demonstrate extreme maneuverability and capabilities beyond the normal. The first person to obtain and publish written information about ATIP was Nick Pope. He obtained a letter to Congress from the DIA dated January the 9th, 2018, in which it was stated that, quote, the purpose of ATIP was to investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapon threats from the present out to the next 40 years, close quote. One would think from that statement that the intention was to investigate future generation Russian and Chinese aerospace assets. An attachment to the letter, however, listed technical reports produced under the ATIP contract, 38 in all, which did not mention Russian or Chinese aerospace technology at all. The papers include anti-gravity, stargates, invisibility cloaking, warp drive, and wormholes, suggesting that ATIP were clearly concentrated on the physics and theory of interstellar travel. One of the papers was even focused on the Drake equation, which was a formula proposed in 1961 to estimate the number of communicating civilizations in our galaxy, or more simply put, the odds of finding intelligent life in the Milky Way. Luis Elizondo was program director of ATIP and later became part of a public benefit cooperation founded by Hal Puthoff along with Tom DeLonge, called To the Stars Academy, or TTSA, which was founded in 2017. In 2018, this statement by Luis Elizondo appeared on Twitter. Rendlesham Forest, United Kingdom. Quote, early 1980s. U.S. service members assigned in England over a period of 3 days encounter what cannot be described as anything else than extraordinary. The events that occurred those 3 days make the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind look amateur. Several of those individuals who were involved in that incident, I had the privilege of debriefing myself. Furthermore, information involving this incident within the next 4 months will be forthcoming, further giving the world a better appreciation of what occurred those 3 nights. The capabilities that were stored at that facility were highly sophisticated and may have even led to UAP interests. In the late 1980s, we continued to have steady stream of Soviet defectors, and on rare occasion, they would share with us insight into the Russian UAP program. Close quote. What has not been made clear is that after John Burroughs' Veteran Administration settlement, Puthoff, Kit Green, and others went via Senator John McCain to request funding for their studies into this technology using the same paperwork John used for his settlement. Puthoff and Davis were the primary authors on 6 of the 38 reports in total between them. Davis is also the co-author on another report from independent consultant Richard Bowsey. Since the list FAS received only notes the primary author, it is impossible to know how many of the studies EarthTech may have actually had a hand in. Now, EarthTech. The Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin was founded in 1985 by Hal Puthoff, Ph.D., and later incorporated under EarthTech International Incorporated. In 1991, as an innovative research facility with a high-powered creative staff dedicated to exploring the forefront reaches of science and engineering. Their research interests include theories of space-time, gravity, and cosmology, studies of the quantum vacuum, modification of standard theories of electrodynamics, interstellar flight science, and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, specifically as these topics may apply to developing innovative space propulsion and sources of energy. They strive to translate these ideas into laboratory experiments. Title: In the meantime, the testing and experimentation continue. Submitted on 3 June 2018, last revised 7 August 2019. Testing a quantum inequality with a meta-analysis of data from squeezed light. G. Jordan McClay, Eric W. Davis. In quantum field theory, coherent states can be created that have negative energy density, meaning it is below that of empty space. The free quantum vacuum. If no restrictions exist regarding the concentration of permanence of negative energy regions, it might, for example, be possible to produce exotic phenomena such as Lorentzian transversible wormholes, warp drives, time machines, violations of the second law of thermodynamics, and naked singularities. Quantum inequalities, or QIs, have been proposed that restrict the size and duration of the regions of negative quantum vacuum energy that can be accessed by observers. However, QIs generally are derived for situations in cosmology and are very difficult to test. Direct measurements of vacuum energy is difficult, and to date, no QI has been tested experimentally. We test a proposed QI for squeezed light by a meta-analysis of published data obtained from experiments with optical parametric amplifiers and balanced homodyne detection. An expansion of the naked singularity has been discussed since In Search of Naked Singularity Scientific American by Avi Loeb on May 3, 2020, the quote, cosmic censorship, close quote, hypothesis says shouldn't exist. But is it possible that we've already detected them and misinterpreted their nature? Avi Loeb suggests that instead of finding reasons to avoid naked singularities, we should cherish the opportunity to find them as a path for exploring new physics. Of course, the crucial unknown in this regard is, quote, what do naked singularities look like, close quote. Owing to the extreme curvature of space-time in their vicinity, naked singularities might produce high-energy particles in a powerful fireball of energy. Do we observe such fireballs in the sky? Is it possible that we have already detected naked singularities but misinterpreted their nature? As Arthur C. Clarke famously stated, any sufficiently advanced technology may seem indistinguishable from magic to those that don't understand it. And if I have learned one thing, it is never to underestimate how small my subset of what I think I know is compared to how much there is to know. Thanks for watching, and we hope this video was able to engage you critical thinkers into action. Working together, we believe it will all come down to us to gather the information, study the data, develop conclusions, and deliver the truth to the world. History has shown that when information is presented to the public to uncover the truth, we deliver every time. Hello, everybody. The Race Hobbs here. I want to welcome you all to some post-program conversation. We're going to bring on the team here in just a moment, and we're gonna kind of go over elements of this program and a little bit about what's really going on in UAP at the moment. There's a lot. I mean, UAP is a hotbed topic nationally, internationally. In all of the major news outlets, all of the network stations, all of the major cable news stations, everybody's talking about UAP, UAP, UAP. Are they getting it right? What could this be? Why are they even telling us what they're doing? We're going to get into all of that and everything you just watched on this edition of Phenomenon Radio. First, I'm going to bring on our contributors, John Burrows. Welcome, John.
Hey, Race.
James Warrow, our researcher over in the UK. Welcome, James.
Welcome. Good evening.
And we're also going to bring on Professor Simon. Many of you out there know who he is. He's a famous YouTuber that does incredible work, thought-provoking videos that you can find on Professor Show. We'll talk about that as well. Professor Simon, welcome to the panel.
Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you here. Gentlemen, I'm gonna go around the table, okay? Because we're just gonna do this round table style, and most of you are familiar with how that goes. Tonight's program was compelling on many levels. We covered UAPs from far back and the possibilities and the potentials of plasmas, and there are just a whole myriad of elements that sort of spiderweb into what we call today UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomena. John, talk a little bit about your thoughts on the collaboration we came together with on this first real 1 hour video compilation.
Well, I think it was important to start from the beginning, and so much of the time people will go on about something that took place today, or currently, and say, well, we didn't have the capabilities 20, 30 years ago to do it. Or how do you explain what we do have today could have been seen back in ancient times? And it's a fine line to draw, which isn't going to be easy as far as tying in ancient times to modern day times, unless you go back and you look at what they saw back in the ancient era and tie in how what they were seeing then was looked at going forward as we started to develop our technology off of it. So who studied it, how it was studied, where it went from there. So it's a fine line to draw. It's something that goes on with every time a discussion starts to take place, or sometimes you can call it an argument, is that you have to show the past to show the present and the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
totally.
150% for sure.
Yeah.
Professor, your thoughts?
Oh, learning from history is vital. There's so much out there that we don't know, and we should remember from the past. My passion is looking at the science of UAP. Plasma research, radar, death rays, they're all connected. Just look at the amazing things that have happened in the 20th century. We discovered the internal workings of the atom, and it was weaponized. We built synchrotrons. They were weaponized. We built cyclotrons, and they fired them at planes. There's so much physics out there which we need to understand that starts making sense of the weaponization of UAP. And this natural phenomenon which science and the military are ignoring. We need to deep dive into all the possibilities of what's natural and what's really man-made.
That's a perfect description of where I wanted to go to with James in these plasmas. Now, James, in this program, there was it was laid out in this program relatively clearly, where anybody who's not a PhD or a serious academic or a scientist can understand exactly what we're trying to convey here about the weaponization of unidentified aerial phenomena and what that is. Give us your thoughts on weaponized plasma.
Well, I agree with Simon in that there are definitely two things at play here. There are things that are man-made, and there are also things that we're still not sure about. That's been recorded, as we said, for eons, since the written word. So, but what I would like to do is what I have been doing is trying to see if any of this apparent technology that goes back years that also kind of crosses over with some of this phenomenon, which has been highlighted by Kit Green and the likes in more so now, and Gary Nolan. There is a crossover here between what's man-made and what's not. Now, what they've come up with is the Havana syndrome, accounting for a certain amount of some of these, effects on people. But what Gary Nolan stated is that there is also still leaves a percentage of the unknowns, the unknowns, which still holds in favour that there is something out there that they're still trying to work on. But I'm digressing, I apologise. But basically, I was trying to look at the technology that have been used nowadays to see if any of this plasma has been used into craft that's being seen in the sky that might actually be ours, rather than obviously something that completely isn't. And I would really was wanted to make sure that we weren't chasing geese, basically. That we was when we was putting all this time and study into looking at a certain sighting, we were totally and thoroughly understandable that what we have now and what we might have could play a part in that. And if it does, is it ours or is it something completely different? Right. And there is definitely, as I said, that was what I want to do. I want to be chasing, like most people out there, the high strangeness. I don't really want to be spending my time chasing something that is potentially ours. Whether it's highly secretive, and spend hours on that while something else might be going on.
Right.
But I also feel that sometimes this has been used as a way to stop us from actually looking at this other side of the coin, if you understand what I mean. But yeah, so literally, I know there's something out there. My mum and dad witnessed something themselves, back in 1975. I've had family members that have had weird light experiences and things like that. And I'm quite sure there is definitely something out there, but I just want to make sure that we're not being taken down the wrong path.
I think it's all about stigma, though. I mean, I think researchers, I've worked in the science field all my life, and nobody touches UFOs. Nobody wants to go to Earth lights. Nobody wants to look at ley lines. It's all seen as, good word, bollocks. And it's not. We need to understand those things which are esoteric, those subtle things which might make a big difference. And personally, I think people have studied them and have used them and integrated them with advanced physics. And I think that possibly is an example of what happened at Rental-Ship.
Very good. Professor Simon, while I've got you here, because this is something a little off of what we're talking about, but I want to get your opinion on what are your thoughts on how that was possible. And when I say that, what I mean that is, how did they get that stigma established in the scientific community that you need to look away from UFOs? You need to look away from anything unidentified in the air, or it could be, potentially damaging to your.
Sure. I mean, it's not only in the science. I mean, yeah, that's actually a good question. I actually don't know why scientists, and actually if they are avoiding them, but certainly the military and the airlines and people like that are avoiding the issue. But I am a media scientist. I worked in television making science films, and I can tell you there's no way in mainstream television people do UFO programs. I mean, nowadays there's lots on other channels, and it's not very vigorous. But no, it was totally stigmatized. And personally, and this is from a bit of a insight, is that the whole UFO phenomenon has been used as a way of actually making fun of witnesses seeing real secret stuff. So, yeah, it's a difficult subject. But at the same time, I also agree with what James has just said, is I think there's a weaponization of the phenomenon and exotic science, secret stuff that has come together that does exist today. There's stuff out there that people are actually doing. I know John those projects. It's the truth is fascinating.
Right, it is. And you laid it out so well before. But, I think in this edition of the program, and this is a great launching point for the show, was establishing, because today, ladies and gentlemen, we could see anything up in the sky.
Right.
I've looked at videos where they have choreographed drones with lights on them to look like the Starship Enterprise up there,
right,
to look like a man's face up there. There's just about anything now you could see, including holograms, that you could see in the sky that could fool your optics that you view the world from. And
well, you can go out and buy, given that on LockheedMartin.com, given enough money, you can buy a pod using laser-induced plasma that will produce a loyal wingman next to your plane to distract an incoming IR missile. And it's visual. You can see it. 3D visualizations are available. I mean, and it's not my or other people's fantasy that this works. You can fire now low power focused lasers into the air. We're old enough to remember cathode ray televisions that drew lines. Lasers draw lines, but now in 3D volumetric space to actually make a fleet of F-22s or a distraction. Do we actually believe what we're seeing in the sky with our own eyes? No, and that's what the military wants us to do. They're using this technology.
Yeah, perfectly, very well said. And establishing within this show, going back, turning the clock back, and going to, because look, I have had this conversation with many people over the years and over my 30 years in this about these cave paintings and these artistic renditions of humanoids with big heads and, like helmets on, and even figurines. We know today, because we can eat and consume the same concoctions that we presumed they consumed, peyote and ayahuasca, and there are a lot of drugs you can take that can cause you to see just about anything you can dream up, can take you mentally to places that you never thought possible. And then you can turn right around and artistically express those in a whittling out a little wood carving, or carving up a stone or relief in stone, or even painting it on the wall of a cave. But when you hear written descriptions that have been handed down from word of mouth over time before writing was possible, when writing came, these were recorded. A lot of these stories were recorded. When you look at the Bible, a book over 2,000 years old, it's filled. When you look at the Holy Bible, not just the Holy Christian Bible, but all of them.
All right.
There's when you go to India, they had the Vimana wars in the sky of objects and lights and things. Yeah. When you go back in time, before there were drones, before there were aircrafts or lighter than air dirigibles and and balloons and that, when the only thing in the air were birds, it makes it very difficult to rule out what they're trying to rule out today. In my opinion, the government's doing a very successful job at releasing things that they damn well know are not real extraterrestrial, off-world, or other dimensional objects, right? And then they turn around and let everybody chew and fester and buzz and spit it out and re-spit it out and jaw on it. Like John said earlier, we even argue about it. Then they come out and say, well, no, we figured out what this is, and it's not ET. And so then a certain percentage of everybody feels like, shh, well, I wasted all that breath, right? And then there's another half of those that are just like conspiracy and they're covering it up, and and then so there's that argument that we're allowed to chew on and debate and discuss and talk about all along the way until the next somebody has some secret contact that let them have a video, and here it is.
Right.
We're all back at that tail chasing shit again. Right. Now, in this edition, it clearly establishes what things were like in the past. Fatima was a fantastic example. This show is filled with many of them and places where this stuff takes place. But today, we're in a buzz again. We're in a buzz again with UAPs and UFOs and shoot downs and and all this going on, and we're all up in the air still as to where we are with this and what it was, and when are we going to find out, and that whole thing. John, give me your thoughts on on today's program that we just presented and what's going on in the media right now. I mean, let's bring these together, because I think they're really in the same house.
Well, you have to go back first of all and understand that the earth has changed. So part of what you said was, were some of these drawings and stuff, did it come from some kind of drug induced, where they were drug induced, then they put it on the walls or whatever. But you also have to understand that the effects and the way the earth was back then, you have to take a close look at that and how the sun was affecting things. Was there some kind of anomaly that took place that caused some of this to be seen? Because there's a difference between looking at a wall and something painted on it and then having people describe what they saw in the sky and what took place. And was that something that the earth, its effect on the earth, the EM fields or whatever, and it affected what people saw? Was it something from somewhere else that was here at the time that was creating some of those effects? Those are all important issues to look at. But then you have to go forward. What I found interesting was Mirage Man. It was a book by Mirage Man, and the author, I believe his name was Pilkington, wrote it. He was out of the UK. And he went along looking at all this stuff in ufology, and he pretty much was disgusted by it. And then he met up with Christopher Green. I believe Hal Puthoff. Those were the two people that he interviewed pretty well. That was before Gary Nolan's time. And he walked away shaking his head saying, there is something to this. And one of the quotes that Green said was, the public's been conditioned. He didn't say from the time War of the Worlds hit the radio, but they've been conditioned forever on what ET is and aliens are. Okay. So now it's what's been taking place, in my opinion, not by the press as much, but by a group that took over, it did involve To the Stars, was they're trying to reset the agenda. And the agenda is, we no longer call it ET, we call it UAPs. Okay. And then we have to take a hard look at what's up in the sky that we can't explain, which goes back to what Robert Bigelow said about confirmation over disclosure, where we have to admit there's something taking place, but we don't have to go down the avenue of identifying exactly what it is to the public, but we have to get the public on board that there's something going on. So they start that interview, they start their process. What I find interesting, which I've never been able to speak to Robert Bigelow directly, and they've never covered this, including George Knapp, is when he did that interview on 60 Minutes, he stated they're here among us. And no one's followed up. And I didn't expect 60 Minutes to ask the question, but why hasn't it been brought up? What does he mean? What is they? How are they here? How can they be identified? None of that's been addressed by To the Stars or even George Knapp. So that's important to know, because we know for a fact that Bigelow was given money by the government through Harry Reid. They had, NIDS? Was it pronounced it properly? And other projects they were working on that were government funded that included Kit Greig, Gary Nolan, John Alexander, Eric Davis, who am I forgetting? A couple other people that were involved. So they've been studying this from different angles, not just, ET as it's been presented to the public. So what we have now is what I saw happen in the last week or so, and it's been on the news more than ever. And what started on Sunday was we went back towards the ET thing and got away from UAPs. When the NORAD commander said we can't rule ET out from the question the reporter asked, right during the Super Bowl, right before it started, he opened up a door that was dangerous because they've been trying to control the narrative with UAP, not just the civilian side, but the military. What they've gone along with so far is there is stuff in the sky that we can't explain, and we need more money to figure it out. But what was interesting to me was a 4-star opened up the can of worms. And it was done during the Super Bowl, which is the biggest event of the day, sometimes of the year. Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So then the next morning, what happens? John Kirby has to come on and try to explain this. And right before he came on stage, Jean-Pierre came on and made fun of ET. And what was funny was that was a Roswell moment, because you had an Air Force officer who's a 4-star, not a colonel, like what took with Roswell, say ET's possibly in play here. We can't rule it out. Now they've got a problem, because how do they get out of that without destroying a 4-star's career, who, by the way, is in charge of NORAD, which is probably the most important thing that the U.S. military has overall, is the protection of our skies.
John, that brings me to something. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that brings me to a point. We need to be clear here. Okay, UFOs. That was the nomenclature. That was UFOs was the identifying term for anything that was up there in our airspace, or anyone's around Earth for that matter, that you can't identify. A physical object that can be seen with your eyes and can be seen with technology, that can be seen with equipment, that we can detect a physical object in the air, okay? But we don't know what it is. We don't know whose it is. We don't know who's operating it. It is under intelligent control, but we don't know whose it is or where it's coming from or what it's here for. That is a UFO. By definition, it's a physical object in the air, maneuvering around, and we don't know who it is or where it's from. That's it. UAP comes onto the scene, unidentified anomalous phenomena or aerial phenomena. I'm not real clear on that. James?
It's changed to anomalous. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's the newest. That's going to be the next FOIA question.
Yeah.
They change the nomenclature again. But what I wanted to say was, then we had a Fife-Symington moment. Probably none of you even know what I'm talking about. When the Phoenix Lights got out of control, even Senator McCain went on a local radio station and said, obviously there's things in the sky that we don't understand, and we need to probably start holding hearings on this. Immediately after that radio interview, and they were losing control of the narrative of what the Phoenix Lights were, because no one was buying it was flares in the sky. Okay. They came out, and Symington held a press conference, and he brought a little green man on stage, and he made fun of ET. And that killed that whole aspect of it from there. So then they were able to walk back a Roswell moment where you had a 4-star saying it could have been from somewhere else. It might be from somewhere else. We don't know yet. We killed the ET when she came on stage and made fun of it, which got Kirby off the hook, because he's an active admiral that's a Pentagon spokesman that was going to maybe have to take questions on why the general said that, and what is the ramifications of how we don't know what it is yet. But she kept that from happening. So then he was able to go, drive the narrative. And even some of the reporters didn't even want to talk about it. They tried to ask other questions. But here was something that I haven't seen reported yet. Kirby, when he was being questioned on UAPs, stated that the President of the United States now gets a daily briefing on that. That is now a national security issue when he's being daily briefed on it. What is that ramifications? Well, to me, that's confirmation that the government is finally taking this serious publicly. They're admitting that it is now being reviewed daily to the president on an intelligence brief. So I thought that was a definite defining moment in the UAP terminology, because the reporter that did bring it up went back to UAP, not ET, and about how the unidentified objects in the sky, and what was going on with that, and then that's when he said it would take it serious. Now, the other factor was that they're now going to start a new committee or whatever that's going to look at rules of engagement. I find that interesting because rules of engagement have been around forever, and they really didn't follow them, because at least that what they're telling us is because they're saying they don't know what it was. So why did we shoot it down if we didn't know what it was? Do you know what I mean? There was no identified of target and why we shot it down. And the last thing was what the pilots over Wisconsin, over the lake, said was, well, they missed with one of the missiles, and they described it differently than the other objects.
Right.
And it appeared that particular one was identified over Montana before it drifted over the lakes, and it was looked at as a radar anomaly by NORAD, and it was allowed to go on and not investigated until it got over Lake Huron. So we have some interesting, aspects that are not being covered, and some of that was immediately shot down by Jean-Pierre when she came on stage and made fun of all that. And that there was a nervous laugh by the reporters, who then refused to even ask why that could even be in play.
Well, see, that's where I was going. That was my the point that I was leading to, was UAP is an entirely different definition than UFO. It's phenomena. It's not object. It's something that defies. It takes me back, Professor Simon, to Luis Elizondo's observables. The observables and those characteristics that are far beyond our known laws of physics and operational.
Hey, Race, can I just interrupt for a minute?
Yeah, of course.
Can't really pin that on Lou. That's Jacques Vallée.
Well, yeah.
We talked about Jacques a little bit in this current one, and Jacques was the one that came up with them. Lou just kind of expanded on them.
Okay. I think that the whole UAP thing, and over to you, James, came out of the Condign report, where Condign basically said, and this is the classic joke that they make, was that 80% of things that were unknown in the sky were identifiable, 20% were classified, and the remaining 1% were aliens. That was their joke in it. But I think they discovered, and the UK is the key to this, have been studying plasma, have been studying phenomenon in the sky, so they didn't want to say it was a physical object race. They wanted to say there's other stuff out there, whatever it is. And I mean, Foo Fighters aren't physical objects, but they are definitely in the sky, and they're definitely UAP.
Right. We're talking, when you're talking about science is up against a dead end, and James laid out a good case in the show about being able to, the scientific method, you have to be able to replicate. Right. And he actually, in his writing, because James wrote the most of this script of this show, right. Him and John, and in it you can hear us talk about trying to recreate ball lightning, trying to establish the scientific method on something that you cannot control. Something that comes and goes when it wants, whenever it wants, how it wants. Skinwalker Ranch is a prime example of how science ran itself ragged trying to figure out how to do that, how to replicate what they were seeing and try to.
I disagree. It's very controversial here. I actually don't think science are taking it seriously enough. I think maybe Skinwalker Ranch are doing a fantastic job at looking at the phenomenon, but actually I think there needs to be more science. I mean, the phenomenon which is recognized, it's called Earth lights. I mean, they occur before, during, and after earthquakes. nobody knows the actual geology of what produces columns of light. They've been seen for hundreds of years.
I've investigated them. I've investigated them right here in Arkansas, as a matter of fact.
Well, brilliant. Brilliant. But is the science of how they're actually produced? I've heard of gases coming out of the ground. I've heard of piezoelectric effects. And I have an amazing theory about electrons and how light is produced. They're possibly a photon event. But I mean, it's all speculative because science isn't really concentrating on the exotic.
Can I ask you something?
Agreed. Well, first, hang on a second, John. Professor, I want to agree with you. Science needs to be all over this heavily.
Yep.
Heavily.
But can I ask you, both of you guys, and James too, science is, Professor, you've done documentaries on this. As soon as they get funding, grants or whatever from the government, even if it's wide at that moment, because our next show is going to talk about work Andrew Pike did right outside the gate at Reynolds and Forest. But as soon as they get the money, as soon as anything comes up of value to the black world and the United States government or other governments, it immediately gets taken underground. Okay, so we can't really say science doesn't take it serious. We can't say that they're not looking into it. The problem is as soon as they get something of value to the government, it immediately they get drawn into the black world. And I'm sure, and I haven't seen contracts and signed, but I'm sure there's probably something in the contract that if the government's funding this, they have the ability to immediately take it black, and they're under non-disclosure. So we can't really say scientists isn't taking it serious or not looking at exotic stuff, because James himself has uncovered a lot of it that they have in documents. But the point is the government walks right in the door and says, thank you. Now, no more. We're not going to talk about this. And what you said earlier, was it you, the professor, Race, that as soon as something of value comes up, they poke fun at it, and then no one wants to discuss it even further.
Yeah, Professor said that, and that's a great point. But I really think that one of the things to come out of all this is we need the public to clearly understand the difference between UFOs and UAPs. That's what I want to say here before we move on. But there's a difference. If they're going to use UAP on the news and that from press briefings from the White House or the Pentagon, then the public needs to understand they're talking about phenomena. They're talking about whatever they shot at or shot down and shot and missed was something that's far beyond what we're using, far beyond an F-18 or a Sukhoi or anything else that we've got flying up there all over the earth that can't intercept these things, that can't shoot one of them down or what have you. Another point that I want to make about tonight's program is how UAP it's not a United States phenomenon. It's not a United States incident. It's not a United States.
Right.
This is a global, a world phenomenon.
Right.
And we have people on the record, admissible testimony, the same testimony that could put any one of the four of us in prison for a long time or life or in a electric chair in the good old days. Human testimony is powerful. And when you've got people with the credentials coming forward saying we tracked objects coming in and out of our atmosphere at 10,000 miles an hour, that's a heavy, heavy reality that we have to absorb and take a serious look at. When we have testimony from generals, brigadier generals, when we have testimony from FBI agents and from teachers and students in school grounds, it all counts. All of this counts. And in today's world, the public is talking about UFOs, you guys, like never before.
Right.
The mainstream media is talking. When they shot whatever these objects were, and they shot them down, I was like, what am I seeing here? Every channel I turned to, local channels, national network channels, the BBC across the pond where you guys are talking about it. James, what are your thoughts on where all of this could take us, in the next couple of months? What can be the positives that we can derive from this? Because I'm always of everybody take a step back, take a deep breath, and let's, don't get ahead of ourselves. But give us your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Well, say again, just an opinion on your question. Really, say it was apparently an extraterrestrial from somewhere else, and we've just blown it out of the sky. That's one thing, that'll upset many people in some respects. But then that's only for people that believe it may actually be that. Then there's my worry that some of these so-called balloons, similar to the ones I used to use in, I think it was World War II and other times like that, where they used to attach payloads of things underneath them and take them over. Now, it's fair enough, you may have a satellite or something beacon underneath one of these, but what you've got to be worried about is if one of these balloons that's coming over had something, who knows, nuclear, chemical, biological warfare, anything within its thing, and then we shoot that out of the sky. Now, is that response gonna be the best? What do you do for the best? Or do you just let it go on its maneuver and, as they say, take it out over the sea?
That's a good point. Professor, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to say two words, and that is what's occurred in the last couple of days is strategic surprise. And we don't want surprises strategically. And I think it changes the world. I think for the first time, it's opened a door, as John Burroughs would say, into a new world, because suddenly the military are looking at the small stuff. It's possible what was happening is that NORAD were still in the Cold War ICBMs, supersonic missile tracking, ignoring the birds, ignoring the Cessnas, and suddenly there's these little things flying around. Hopefully, if they've parsed and opened up the NORAD radar system, if they hadn't actually already done it, which is a possibility, suddenly it's brought the small stuff, the esoteric, to the public attention and to government attention. Maybe the president is now getting briefed, as John says, on a daily basis about the stuff that we didn't ever talk about because it was ignored. I have on good authority that weapon operators, submarine sonar operators, airline pilots, radar operators see stuff all the time. And because it's not part of their world and weapon system, they choose to ignore it. I think this incursion into US airspace with weird stuff is a good thing.
I would certainly agree with that. John, give us your thoughts before we move to closing.
Well, I wonder, not to say the professor's wrong, but okay, we have rules of engagement. I can't believe that NORAD didn't have the capabilities to look at a lot of this stuff. Not maybe the small stuff that, just the last three that they claim were smaller than a weather balloon. But maybe they didn't, because now they're backpedaling and say they tracked us from China. But really, how did they track it from China and then let it come up over Alaska, go pump down across the center of the United States and go out, and then finally take it down to the East Coast? But you have to wonder, rules of engagement are in place. And that was the thing I took. They had 3 of the pilots that were involved in the Tic Tac stuff on the network over the last day or so. I watched their analogy, and all 3 of them said that we have rules of engagement, and why are they being changed now? And then and they've actually said that they want to change them now. That's part of this panel that Biden's now putting in place. Why are we changing rules of engagement? That's an important question. The second question is were we that bad as the superpower of the world? They were going to be able to float balloons over, which, like you said, Professor, could have biological or EMP bombs and stuff like that. Were we really that negligent, or were we that cocky that no one would dare? That's an interesting concept to look at too. But ultimately, all to me this has done so far is got the press to talk more about it. And now it's up to them and the public to push this, to get this more out in the open. And that's the one thing that stands about this. Everybody inside Congress, both sides of the aisle, are now saying our president, the United States president, should address the American public. And he's refusing to do it. And that's another question. Why?
Well, he hid in a bunker for the entire election, pretty much in his basement. It's nothing new to me. But my thing is this, and John, I want to get your thoughts on this first. Why do we even know that they're shooting at things and shooting things down? Now, the balloon, we could see that with our naked eye from the ground. We could see the balloon. We could take a cell phone, zoom in on it. It's all over the World Wide Web. Videos of, these jets intercepting it, shooting a missile and blowing it up. You can see that. A car, a small car, hovering and maneuvering at 40,000 feet. You're not going to see that with your naked eye.
Well, air pilots could. Possibly. They claim the reason why they said they brought it down was because it was interfering with.
But why? Why are they telling us all of a sudden?
Well, then you'd have to go back and say simply, did we get caught off guard by the balloon? Was the public pressure saying, why did we let this happen? And is this just wagging the dog? I think the professor, you said that to me privately. Are we just wagging the dog because now we're letting the public know, well, don't worry about it, we're here, and are we just trying to make it look like we've got this under control? But actually, whoever thought that idea up, it backfired on them, because it makes it look like we have it less under control, because we're not following rules of engagement and we're not open to telling anybody what we shot down and what's going on.
It was the reporter, John, that asked the question, how are you all of a sudden seeing all these? And they're talking about, we turned our radars this direction. Like we didn't have any radars in that direction to start with. The very direction the enemy is going to be sent.
No, actually, Race, I don't believe that's what was meant. They have, I think the professor and James can back me up on this. This is not old radars anymore. This is all computer controlled. And they have programs in it, and the computers drive the radars.
What they said. That's what they said.
Well, they did, but then they went further and they said anomaly, and that they opened up the filters, which is different than the radars. It's the filters of the AI that's monitoring the skies. The radar operators are seeing it still, but the filters are the ones that are identifying it. It's different. The radar systems today are different than they were when they first began. Absolutely. So this is a boondoggle, because I think they were trying to say, well, we've got this under control, don't worry about it. But the public and the press, and especially the press, because our press is, for the last 4 or 5 years, has just gone along pretty much with a lot of what's been sold. And this time the press stood up and said, no, not this time. And the Senate and the House members have also said, no, we're not going to go a party line anymore. We want to know. And that's even what our Congress was doing with the actually forcing into law to investigate what UAPs were, wanting to know what our intelligence agency knew. So some of this has changed, but I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't understand this either. I think who's ever controlling this should be fired. And you can't say the president himself, because that's why he has his advisors. And I don't really think he's controlling any of this. He's just being put out there, and they don't want to put him out there for right now for whatever reason. But ultimately, whoever controlled this whole thing from the balloon to this probably should be fired, in my opinion.
What do you think?
We need to press our politicians more. We need to get answers. And I think in some ways, this strategic surprise could open that possibility. We want to know what's going on. The press want to know what's going on. Congress wants to know what's going on. And I think there is a lot of misinformation out there. And it's just possible that this could be a turning point because suddenly we shot down something over U.S. airspace, an unidentified flying object, as you would say, Race. Absolutely. And, there's other stuff out there and people are seeing it. Let's force them to be a bit more honest.
Agreed. James, what do you think?
Well, I think it gives a good excuse if anyone wants an excuse to go for more funding for laser defense systems on land in the United States of America, rather than having them just necessarily at certain bases and for safeguards and stuff like that. To actually have them on mainland, to actually maybe the next step. Maybe just an excuse so sometimes I call it sometimes a problem reaction solution scenario, problems created, for a certain reaction, which would be, something's got to be done about this. And then they'll come out with a solution. We've got this technology, we could possibly use this, use that. And then again, funding and things. But that's just my kind of first thought on it. There's probably many other possible reasons, but that's just my own initial thought.
Yeah,
I agree, Race. I agree with James that this will open up a Pandora's box for more funding. And one other point I want to make off of James on that. Okay, Congress is pushing the envelope right now on the intelligence agencies and what are we going to do about all this? Okay, in a way, and it at least started that way, but it's kind of got out of control, was the government, the military said, intelligence said, okay, we've opened up the box. We're admitting there's more stuff out there. We've shot some stuff down. What do you want us to do now, Congress? And it goes back to what James just said. Okay, well, whatever you want us to do is going to take more money and more technology and more exotic technology to deal with all this, even if it's as simple as a balloon. Because one of the pilots last night that was involved in the incident off the East Coast said that we don't have the technology and capabilities, and an F-18 isn't the answer to being able to track these and deal with these. We need something more exotic and advanced.
Fravor made that more than clear, didn't he, John?
Yeah, but this was a different guy, and I wish I would have wrote his name down at the time because I just caught the interview at the tail end. But his final answer was the F-18 and and other fighter pilots aren't the answer to this. It's other technology that either is on the drawing board or hasn't been developed yet that will have to deal with this going forward.
The actual physical thing of it being at 60,000 feet. I mean, the F-22 is only cleared to about 50,000 feet. Obviously, it can go higher. And we shot, what was it? $4.8 million missile at a bloody balloon? Come on. We need other solutions for this high-flying weird stuff, as you say, John.
I think we could have used a couple of good old 50 cows from a B-51.
Well, that question was brought up in a enough race, and the pilot's answer was that it was too dangerous on a stationary target to the way the planes fly nowadays to open up with with bullets. Whether this is or not, that's the problem. Is there's no investigative reporter out there, and that's what hopefully we can do, Professor James and I and you, Race, and other people we bring in that can answer some of these unknown questions, never mind the history going forward on what we're developing and how we're developing and where this is all going. So stay tuned, folks. This is what we're working on.
I think it's really important that us, social media, can actually be involved in answering some of these big questions. You are experts. Lots of people out there know their stuff. Let's not just rely on our government, who aren't going to tell us the truth, but crowdsourcing some of these answers and crowdsourcing looking at some of the phenomenon and actually feet on the ground. I think that is one way forward to actually getting to the bottom of some of this stuff.
Well, I've said it before. I've said it, I think, in the context of this very show, that history has shown that when information is presented to the public to uncover the truth, we deliver out here. I mean, think back to like, and you know, if you have a question about what I'm talking about, viewers, think about back when the Zodiac killings happened. He gave out these codes, these ciphers that had to be, and they put it in the newspaper, and people out in the public figured it out before authorities could.
Sure.
There's murder cases. You know, this Abby Petito or whatever her name was, that the little girl, the couple that was out in Utah and got pulled over, and then she wound up missing, and he came back home alone. And there were people all over the World Wide Web sluicing out videos and information, and they all concluded that she was out there at the Tetons somewhere, and that video of her in that of that van, those people that drove by their van saw pairs of shoes that were sitting at the bottom of it. It was only one pair of shoes. The door actually closed. These details can be certainly discerned from law enforcement, but when you present things to the public, they can figure it out. They can sluice it out. There are we're smart people.
We are. I mean, not to mention my YouTube channel, but I end with saying the truth is out there. And I don't mean it's a reference to the X-Files. I mean, we are living in a different world. This is social media. This isn't television that makes a program and closes it. And when smart people come along and tell the TV program that they got it wrong, that's it. We can do follow-ups. We can speak to the experts out there. We can solve murder cases because they know about shoes, they know about the van, and they walk on the Tetons. They're the people that you should be asking. And there's people out there who work in physics, who work in exotic stuff, who know.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we are the ones with the power.
Yeah.
The world is so much smaller now.
And connected.
I'm talking to you in France, Professor. I'm talking to James in England. I'm talking to John Burroughs in the Midwest. And I'm down here in beautiful River Valley in Arkansas. And we're doing it in real time. And we're talking to all of you out there around the world who have so graciously taken the time, your precious time out of your day to come watch our video, and we appreciate it. Folks, we hope we earn a subscription from you. Please go to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Phenomenon Radio Show. youtube.com/Phenomenon Radio Show. I'm hoping that our illustrious producer will put it down here on the bottom of the screen for all of you. And then, Professor, I want to give you the opportunity to promote your YouTube channel and do that now.
I worked in television all my life. I've retired from broadcast television. There's so many science programs out there that weren't made. Can you imagine with a schedule of, say, 5 novas a year or 10 BBC Horizons that James would know? 50 didn't get made. And I remember the good subjects. So now I'm retired and I'm a goat farmer in France. I can now actually work on these. And then social media came along, and I realized YouTube is an amazing resource because, as I've just said, people know their stuff. So I start off subjects, and the comments, and I can do follow-ups, is the whole point of my humble channel, Professor Simon. And, you know, it's really fun to understand what people know.
And Professor, you make it fun to learn. Anybody with a brand new interest in this subject, or someone like myself or John or James that's been in it for decades and decades, can go to your channel and we can still learn. We can still contribute because you present a lot of stuff that your viewers present to you. And that when you listen to us, ladies and gentlemen, we listen to you.
Hey, Ray, so that's a valid point before you close. Folks, if you've got questions, send them through the YouTube channel, And each show going forward, we'll try to address some of them. We can't promise we'll address every one of them, but we'll try to take a few and take a little segment to answer some of them. And with the professor here and James, they're going to be there. I don't like to use the word expert, but they have a really good knowledge of what's going on, and they can probably give you a better understanding of what's going on. Because really, just when you think you know it all, something pops up to totally send you down a different avenue.
Share what you know. It's really important.
It truly is. And James, would you in your closing, would you make sure to mention where people can pick up the book? Tell them about the book.
The book Weaponization of UAP can be found on Kindle, or you go to Amazon and you just type in the title and it will come straight up on Amazon, and you can either purchase it there as a paperback, or you can order a Kindle version, which can be read via Kindle online. And again, the link will hopefully show at the bottom of the show here.
Awesome. Do you have any closing thoughts, James, that you want to express real quick?
I've got a few things, but it will probably take us another hour. But so I'll save that for the next little round that we have, if that's okay for now.
Fair enough. For James Warrow, for John Burroughs, and our very special friend, Professor Simon, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Professor has joined the team. He's working with us in this project, doing all the video editing and all of the video elements. So all of the beautiful artwork and video work you see on these shows moving forward will be all attributed to him and credited to him. He's amazing, and we're so glad that he's goat farming and hanging out in his cool pad, living the dream in France, and getting to do the good work with the amazing talents that he has. John Burroughs and of course James Warrow, the contributors and the major element and behind the force in this program. Thank you guys so much. Join us. Be among the first to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel at youtube.com at Phenomenon Radio Show. Find us and follow us on social media. And our brand new website is under construction, so be looking for information on that coming soon. Phenomenon Radio is broadcast every week on the UNX network, and it's all on demand on podcast pockets all over the World Wide Web, just like Spotify and iHeart and Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, and it's easy to find out there. You're going to be able to get all of the audio on-demand stuff at all of your favorite spots. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Have a great night and a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
There you go.